was a sudden change for Anthony Green. A jury convicted him of and only 38 minutes later, the jail set him free.
Walk us through what happened.
Yes, so Anthony Green was here in jail at 201 Pop.
It all happened faster than anyone expected. And now the internet is asking the same question on repeat. Did Pooh Shiesty just make the biggest mistake of his life? New allegations are surfacing that claim the Memphis rapper may have helped his close homie break free from a situation authorities were desperately trying to control. What was once whispered in corners is now being discussed openly, and the implications are explosive. If these claims stick, this isn't just another controversy. It could be the final chapter. For years, Pooh Shiesty has walked a thin line between street loyalty and rap stardom. Fans admired his raw authenticity, his refusal to abandon the people who came up with him. But that same loyalty may now be the very thing pulling him down. According to emerging reports and online speculation, investigators believe someone close to Pooh played a role in helping a wanted associate evade consequences, and all signs are pointing in one dangerous direction. Social media erupted the moment the allegations hit. Some fans rushed to his defense, saying this is just another attempt to drag his name while he's already vulnerable. Others weren't so sure, pointing out a troubling pattern that's followed Pooh Shiesty from the start of his career. Screenshots, old lyrics, past interviews. Everything is being dug up, reanalyzed, and used to build a narrative that paints a grim picture. The question isn't just what happened. It's how deep does this really go? What makes this situation even more serious is the timing. Pooh Shiesty was already fighting to reclaim his future, already under intense scrutiny, already with little room left for error. Now, with these new allegations suggesting direct involvement in helping someone break free, the stakes have skyrocketed. This isn't about image anymore. This is about intent, accountability, and whether loyalty crossed into criminal territory. If authorities decide these claims have weight, the consequences could be devastating, not just for Pooh Shiesty, but for everyone connected to him. Careers have ended for far less. And as the pressure mounts, one thing is clear. This story is only beginning. Because if even part of what's being alleged turns out to be true, Pooh Shiesty might truly be done. The moment the allegations surfaced, everything around Pooh Shiesty shifted. What had once been quiet speculation suddenly turned loud, chaotic, and impossible to ignore. Online conversations exploded overnight, fueled by fragments of information, vague claims, and the dangerous power of assumption. No official conclusions had been reached, yet the court of public opinion was already in session. For an artist whose career had always been shadowed by controversy, this wasn't just another rumor. It felt like a turning point. The kind that changes how every past move is reinterpreted and every future opportunity is questioned. At the center of the storm was the claim that someone close to Pooh Shiesty may have received help escaping a situation authorities were actively monitoring. The details were unclear, but that uncertainty only made the reaction more intense. Fans and critics alike began piecing together timelines, analyzing old posts, lyrics, and associations as if they were evidence in a trial. In the digital age, gaps in information don't slow narratives down, they accelerate them. And as the story gained traction, Pooh Shiesty's name was no longer attached to musical momentum, but to a question mark with serious consequences. What made this hit harder was Pooh Shiesty's history. From the beginning, his image was built on authenticity and loyalty. He never pretended to be something he wasn't, and that rawness earned him respect in the streets and credibility in the industry. But loyalty, when placed under a microscope, can quickly be reframed as recklessness. Critics argued that this situation, alleged or not, fit a pattern they believed had been there all along. Supporters pushed back just as fiercely, insisting that association does not equal involvement and that assumptions were being weaponized against him. As the conversation intensified, silence became its own statement. Pooh Shiesty didn't rush to address the claims, and that hesitation only fueled speculation. Some interpreted it as legal caution, others as avoidance. In situations like this, every move, or lack of one, is read as intentional. A single post could inflame the situation. A single denial could backfire if details later contradicted it. The margin for error was razor-thin, especially for someone already under scrutiny. The pressure wasn't just external, it was strategic. One wrong step could turn allegations into something far more damaging. Industry insiders began quietly discussing the implications. Labels, promoters, and collaborators don't wait for verdicts. They respond to risk. Even unproven allegations can freeze momentum, delay projects, and cool relationships. Pooh Shiesty's future, once discussed in terms of chart potential and influence, was now being evaluated through a different lens entirely. Could he be trusted? Would his name bring complications? These questions linger long before answers arrive, and sometimes they do more damage than the truth itself. Meanwhile, social media continued doing what it does best, simplifying complex situations into sides. Some fans framed Pooh Shiesty as a victim of circumstance, arguing that he was being targeted because of his background and associations. Others claimed this was the inevitable result of refusing to distance himself from certain environments. The nuance was lost in the noise. Few paused to consider what was actually known versus what was assumed. But outrage spreads faster than clarity, and by the time cooler heads weighed in, the narrative had already hardened. Part 1 of this story isn't about conclusions, it's about collision. The collision between loyalty and consequence, silence and speculation, reputation and reality. Whether the allegations hold weight or fall apart, the impact is already real. Pooh Shiesty now stands at the center of a moment that could redefine everything attached to his name. And as pressure builds from every direction, one thing is certain: this situation won't resolve quietly. What happens next won't just determine how this story ends. It will determine whether there's a comeback chapter at all. As the allegations continued to circulate, the situation surrounding Pooh Shiesty grew heavier and more complicated. What began as scattered claims slowly morphed into a broader narrative, one that no longer depended on facts alone but on perception, timing, and history. Each day without clarity allowed speculation to harden into belief for some, while others clung to the idea that this was yet another example of an artist being judged before the truth had a chance to surface. In this environment, uncertainty became the most dangerous factor of all. Behind the scenes, the pressure was relentless. Legal teams moved cautiously, understanding that any public response had to be airtight. In cases like this, saying too much can be just as damaging as saying nothing. Every word is scrutinized, replayed, and interpreted through a hostile lens. Pooh Shiesty's silence wasn't accidental. It was strategic, but the past resurfaced in uncomfortable ways. Old interviews, lyrics, and affiliations were dragged back into the spotlight, stripped of their original context and reframed to fit the current narrative. Moments that once seemed harmless or performative were suddenly treated as foreshadowing. This is the danger of retroactive judgment. Once a person is under suspicion, everything they've ever said becomes suspect. For Pooh Shiesty, an artist whose authenticity had always been tied to real-life experience, this was especially damaging. The very qualities that built his fan base were now being used to question his judgment. Industry reaction followed a familiar pattern. There were no loud statements or public condemnations, just quiet distance. Meetings paused, conversations slowed. Opportunities that once felt guaranteed suddenly required re-evaluation. In entertainment, uncertainty is often enough to stall momentum indefinitely. Even without formal consequences, the damage can compound through hesitation alone. Pooh Shiesty's name, once synonymous with raw energy and promise, was now associated with risk. And in an industry driven by optics, risk is rarely welcomed. Fans remained divided, but the tone shifted. Defenders still spoke up, emphasizing the lack of confirmed details and warning against rushing to conclusions. They pointed out how often artists from certain backgrounds are assumed guilty by association. On the other side, critics argued that patterns matter, that repeated proximity to trouble eventually demands accountability. The debate wasn't really about this single situation anymore. It was about identity, responsibility, and how much grace someone deserves when the stakes are high. As the noise grew louder, the human cost became clearer. Pressure like this doesn't stay confined to headlines. It bleeds into every part of life. Friends become cautious. Trust tightens. Every interaction carries weight. For someone already navigating limited options and intense scrutiny, the mental toll is enormous. The sense that the world is waiting for you to fail can be paralyzing, or it can harden resolve. Which direction this would take was still unclear. Part 2 of this story is about escalation without resolution. The allegations hadn't been proven, but they hadn't disappeared either. They hung in the air, shaping conversations and decisions in real time. Pooh Shiesty found himself in a familiar but dangerous place, defined not by outcomes, but by questions. And as long as those questions remained unanswered, the pressure would only increase. The next phase wouldn't be decided by rumors alone. It would be decided by what surfaced, what stuck, and whether the truth, whatever it may be, could arrive before the narrative closed and completely. As the story pushed into its next phase, the atmosphere around Pooh Shiesty grew noticeably colder. What once felt like noise now felt like surveillance. Every movement, every association, every rumor carried extra weight. The allegations had settled into the background like a low hum, constant, unsettling, impossible to ignore. Even without new information, the narrative kept evolving, driven by speculation rather than facts. People weren't asking if something happened anymore. They were asking how much happened and who else might be involved. That shift alone marked a dangerous turning point. The scrutiny began to feel personal. Old relationships were suddenly framed as liabilities, and past decisions were revisited with unforgiving hindsight. Loyalty, once praised as a core part of Pooh Shiesty's identity, was now being dissected as a flaw. Commentators questioned whether staying close to certain people was a conscious choice or a lack of foresight. In reality, it was likely neither that simple nor that clean, but complexity doesn't survive well in viral conversations. Nuance was replaced by certainty, and certainty became the loudest voice in the room. Behind closed doors, the tension intensified. Those close to Pooh Shiesty reportedly urged caution, restraint, and focus. Not every battle is meant to be fought publicly, especially when legal consequences could follow. But restraint comes with its own cost. Watching others control your story, reshape your intentions, and assign motives without response can feel like surrender. Every day that passed without clarity made the weight heavier. The silence that once felt strategic now felt like a vacuum, one others were eager to fill. Meanwhile, the industry continued its quiet recalibration. No public statements, no dramatic fallout, just distance. That distance spoke volumes. In entertainment, momentum is fragile, and controversy, especially unresolved controversy, has a way of slowing everything down. Conversations stalled. Plans became tentative. Even supporters grew cautious, choosing words more carefully, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. It wasn't hostility, it was hesitation. And hesitation can be just as damaging. Emotionally, this phase tested resolve more than reputation. Being under a microscope forces uncomfortable reflection. Every choice feels amplified. Every mistake feels permanent. For Pooh Shiesty, the question wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about identity. Who are you when the image you built starts working against you? When the authenticity that once earned respect is reframed as recklessness? Those questions don't have easy answers, and they don't disappear once asked. Part 3 isn't about collapse, but it's not about recovery either. It's about suspension, the moment where everything hangs in the balance. The allegations hadn't reached a conclusion, but the pressure had reached a peak. The path forward narrowed, demanding patience, discipline, and careful judgment. Whether this moment would become a defining failure or a painful lesson depended on what came next. And in a situation this tense, the next move, made or avoided, could change everything. By the time the situation entered its fourth phase, the pressure had stopped building and started crushing. This was a stage where consequences no longer felt hypothetical. Even without formal updates, the environment around Pooh Shiesty had changed in subtle but undeniable ways. Conversations felt guarded. Opportunities that once seemed automatic now required justification. The unspoken question followed him everywhere. Is this risk worth it? In an industry driven by perception, doubt can be more damaging than proof, and doubt had fully taken root. The public narrative continued to harden, shaped less by new information and more by repetition. The same talking points echoed across platforms, slowly transforming speculation into assumed truth. Clips were taken out of context. Old moments were reframed as warnings people should have seen earlier. It didn't matter whether these connections were fair or accurate. What mattered was how easily they spread. Once a story becomes familiar, it stops being questioned. It becomes background noise people accept without thinking, and that's when it does the most damage. Inside the circle, the mood reportedly shifted from concern to calculation. Every move was weighed. Every appearance was debated. The focus wasn't on winning public opinion, but on minimizing fallout. That meant fewer statements, fewer risks, fewer chances to be misunderstood. But that approach came with its own danger. Absence creates space, and space invites imagination. There was also the emotional toll, something rarely discussed but deeply felt. Living under constant suspicion wears people down. Trust becomes fragile. Even genuine support can feel conditional when you're unsure who's watching and why. For someone whose identity was built around confidence and presence, this period felt like being slowly erased. Not through a single dramatic event, but through a series of quiet withdrawals that added up to isolation. Fame can be loud, but fallout is often silent. Part 4 represents the moment where survival becomes the priority. Not reputation, not dominance. Survival. It's where ego has to step aside for strategy, and where patience becomes the only real weapon. Whether the allegations ultimately hold weight or fade away, this phase forces a reckoning. It asks whether lessons will be learned or repeated, whether loyalty will be redefined or remain unchanged. The storm hadn't passed yet, but by now, it was clear that walking out of it would require more than silence. It would require a reset, a recalibration, and the discipline to move differently than before. By the final phase, everything had slowed down, but not because the danger was gone. It slowed because this was the moment where outcomes began forming quietly, away from the noise. The frenzy had burned itself out, leaving behind something far more serious: permanence. This was no longer about trending topics or viral takes. It was about what would remain once the internet moved on. For Pooh Shiesty, the question wasn't whether people were still talking. It was what version of him would survive when they stopped. The weight of that reality forced a shift in mindset. Reacting was no longer an option. Every impulsive response, every emotional decision, carried consequences that could stretch far beyond the present moment. This phase demanded restraint, clarity, and a willingness to accept uncomfortable truths. Loyalty had always been central to his identity, but now it required reevaluation. Where does loyalty end and responsibility begin? That line, once blurred, now stood sharply defined. Ignoring it again wasn't just risky, it was destructive. What became clear was how fragile momentum really is. Success builds fast, but stability takes discipline. The same intensity that fueled his rise had also created blind spots, and those blind spots were exposed under pressure. Part 5 is where reflection replaces defense. Not everything can be blamed on outside forces, and not every consequence is unfair. Growth, if it's real, begins with accountability, even when that accountability hurts. Behind the scenes, decisions were being made that would shape the future quietly. Not flashy moves, not public declarations, just careful recalibration. Who stays close? Who steps back? What paths are no longer worth walking? Reinvention doesn't always come with an announcement. Sometimes it happens in silence, one choice at a time. This stage wasn't about winning back everyone. It was about preserving what could still be saved. Emotionally, this period carried a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. When the noise finally fades, what's left is the truth you can't escape. The pressure either breaks people or refines them. For Pooh Shiesty, the outcome depended on whether he could separate identity from circumstance. Being defined solely by allegations, proven or not, is a trap. Escaping that trap requires redefining purpose beyond survival and reputation. This is the phase where legacy starts being written, not by headlines, but by behavior. The public may never know every detail, and they don't need to. What matters is the direction forward. Mistakes don't have to be endings, but repeated patterns often are. The difference lies in awareness and change. Part 5 isn't about redemption yet, but it's about the possibility of it. Possibility only exists if lessons are actually learned. As the story reaches this point, one thing becomes undeniable. The margin for error is gone. There are no more free passes, no more benefit of the doubt. Every move from here on out carries weight. And in that sense, this moment is both the most dangerous and the most powerful. Because when there's nothing left to lose, there's also nothing left to hide behind. This chapter doesn't close with certainty. It closes with responsibility. Whatever comes next will be the result of choices made in this quiet, critical stretch. And whether this story is remembered as a downfall or a turning point depends entirely on what happens after the cameras stop rolling. Car 150 words. Pooh Shiesty's latest allegations aren't just headlines. They are a harsh reminder of how quickly loyalty, reputation, and momentum can collide under pressure. What started as speculation has turned into a test of resilience, strategy, and the ability to navigate life when every move is magnified. This story shows that surviving the storm isn't just about denying claims or controlling narratives. It's about reflection, accountability, and making deliberate choices for the future. For fans, observers, and anyone watching from the sidelines, the lesson is clear. How you respond under pressure defines your next chapter. Pooh Shiesty now faces a crossroads, and the decisions he makes in this critical moment will determine whether this is a temporary setback or a career-defining turning point. Comment below with your thoughts. Do you think he can recover? Follow for more updates as we continue to track the untold developments behind the headlines.